This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. We're broadcasting from Dubai, from the UN Climate Summit. I'm Amy Goodman. Gaza's health ministry says Israeli strikes have killed more than 800 people since Saturday, after Israel targeted the besieged Palestinian territory with some of its most violent assaults yet, including parts of southern Gaza previously designated by Israel's military as safe zones. Dozens were killed as Israel flattened homes in the Jabalia refugee camp where displaced families were sheltering. While in Gaza's city Shujaiya neighborhood, Israeli strikes destroyed 50 residential buildings and homes, killing more than 300 people. Ambulance drivers have been targeted by Israeli snipers, including a medic who was shot transporting an injured person towards Al-Auda Hospital. UNICEF spokesperson James Elder delivered this message from inside Gaza's Nasser Hospital.
We cannot see more children with the wounds of war, with the burns, with the shrapnel littering their body, with the broken bones. Inaction by those with influence is allowing the killing of children. This is a war on children. Clearly, words, clearly pleas from the world do not make a difference on those who have the power to stop the killing, the maiming of children.
We'll speak with a Palestinian reporter outside Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis after headlines. Following the collapse of the temporary truce Friday, Israel continues to restrict the number of aid trucks permitted into the besieged enclave as Gazans continue to plead for food, water, and a permanent end to the attacks.
The days of the truce, God protect us. We slept, we rested, there was no drones and we were living well. But with what happened today, we've been living in fear and anxiety. Really, fear has returned. The sadness has returned. With every explosion, we sprung up. Is it in front of us? Is it behind us? We are living in terror. If anyone has any way to help us, we are dying of starvation.
Over the weekend, Hamas said it would not release any more Israeli hostages until a ceasefire comes into effect and Israel releases all Palestinian prisoners. Meanwhile, top U.S. officials have publicly warned Israel's military about the thousands of Palestinian civilians it has killed. This is Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin.
You see, in this kind of a fight, the center of gravity is the civilian population. And if you drive them into the arms of the enemy, you replace a tactical victory with a strategic defeat.
Austin's warning came as the Wall Street Journal reported the U.S. has supplied Israel with 15,000 bombs, including 2,000-pound bunker busters and 57,000 artillery shells since October 7th. Here in the United States, a protester is in critical condition after setting themselves on fire Friday outside the Israeli consulate in Atlanta, Georgia. Authorities said the protester never posed a threat to consular staff, and the self-immolation was believed to be, quote, an act of extreme political protest. In Denver, Colorado, hundreds of Jewish activists and their allies blocked traffic on the busy Spear Boulevard Sunday following a week of protests outside the Colorado Convention Center, where the Jewish National Fund was holding its global conference for Israel. 15 members of Jewish Voice for Peace were arrested after chaining themselves together on the road and halting traffic for an hour. The United Auto Workers became the latest and largest union to call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The UAW joins the American Postal Workers Union, the California Nurses Association, the Chicago Teachers Union, and others in calling for a ceasefire. The UAW is also creating a divestment and just transition working group and taking a closer look at the union's economic ties to the conflict. The United Nations COP28 Climate Summit opened here in Dubai Thursday, with delegates agreeing to adopt a new loss and damage fund to help poorer nations deal with the disproportionate impact of the climate crisis. Initial funding will start at $429 million, just a fraction of what's needed to address the annual cost of climate catastrophes. Governments from the Global South and climate activists welcomed the fund, but underlined its deficiencies. This is Libyan activist Nissa Beck.
Considering the fact that most of these developing countries that actually need the fund are politically unstable, already the prerequisite for receiving the fund is not there. The loss and damage fund will only be a band-aid if fossil fuel continue to be produced. Loss and damage from climate change cost $1.5 trillion last year alone.
Barbados's Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, called for major reforms to global financial institutions and for firm and binding commitments from governments.
We live now in the age of superlatives. And in the age of superlatives, we've seen this year 1/3 of the days of the year exceed 1.5 degrees. In Glasgow, I said this was a death sentence. It is a death sentence for many. And the reality is that unless we change course and adopt the policies that can in fact help mitigate that increase in temperatures, we are going to see far more lives lost and far more damage done. I've asked the world simply, let us agree to leave here with a global methane agreement.
A number of world leaders used their time on the global stage to speak out against Israel's assault on Gaza, including South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, Colombian President Gustavo Petro, and Jordanian King Abdullah. Later in the broadcast, we'll hear voices from a protest for Gaza here at the UN Climate Summit. COP28 President Sultan Al-Jaber is facing a new wave of criticism after claiming there's no science backing the phase-out of fossil fuels. Al-Jaber, who also heads the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company, ADNOC, made the comments during a virtual panel last month on women and climate change in response to Mary Robinson, former UN Special Envoy for Climate Change and former President of Ireland.
There is no science out there or no scenario out there that says that the phase out of fossil fuel is what's going to achieve 1.5. 1.5 is my North Star.
During the combative exchange with former President Mary Robinson, Al-Jaber repeatedly lashed out defensively and chastised the former Irish president.
The science is very acute now. We don't have any time. They say 6 or 7 years. We've got to peak by 2025 latest in fossil fuel. New fossil fuel. And your company is investing in a lot more new fossil fuel. And that's going to hurt women.
Ma'am, you've just accused me of something that is not correct. I'm sorry, I don't take it. Now I ask you to prove to me.
I read that your company is investing in a lot more fossil fuel in the future.
Yes, ma'am, you're reading your own media, which is biased and wrong. I am telling you, I am the man in charge, and it is wrong, ma'am. You need to listen to me.
In the lead up to COP28, reports emerged that Al-Jaber was using the event to make oil deals with foreign governments. Al-Jaber rejected the reports. In remarks earlier today, he reiterated what he called his commitment to science, telling reporters here at COP, quote, "We very much believe and respect the science." Venezuelans have approved a voter referendum claiming sovereignty over a disputed area on Venezuela's border with Guyana. The region of Essequibo is roughly 60,000 square miles of mostly dense jungle and is rich in oil and mineral reserves. Venezuela's long-held claim to the land, which it says was stolen when borders between the two nations were drawn by international arbitrators over a century ago when Guyana was still a British colony. Sunday's referendum has heightened fears in Guyana that Venezuela could try to take over Essequibo through annexation. On Friday, the International Court of Justice warned Venezuela against taking any action to assert control over Essequibo. In the Philippines, the Islamic State has claimed responsibility for an explosion during a Catholic Mass Sunday that killed 4 people and injured dozens of others. The blast went off inside the gymnasium of Mindanao State University in Marawi, the Philippines' largest Muslim city. A survivor recounted her ordeal.
first, we were singing during the Mass, then there was a sudden explosion behind us. We thought it was just the speakers, but then everybody started running. I stumbled and my friend told me to keep running. That's all I can remember. When I got out of the gym, I fell, and my friend started crying because they saw I was wounded in the back.
In 2017, the Philippines government waged a months-long battle to dislodge ISIS-allied militants in Marawi, laying waste to much of the southern city and killing nearly 1,200 people. Back in the United States, Sandra Day OConnor, the first woman to serve as a U.S. Supreme Court justice, has died at the age of 93. She was appointed by President Reagan, sworn in 1981. She served until 2006. She often acted as a swing vote at the court, including the 1992 landmark case, Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which upheld the constitutional right to an abortion. In 2000, Justice O'Connor cast the fifth vote in Bush v. Gore, leading to George W. Bush's election victory. 2.5 years later, Bush led the U.S. into an illegal invasion of Iraq. In 2013, the then-retired Sandra Day OConnor suggested the Supreme Court should not have taken the Bush v. Gore case. And the House voted on Friday to expel New York Republican George Santos over multiple ethics violations, making him just the sixth Congress member to ever be ousted from the House of Representatives by fellow lawmakers. The bipartisan vote came as Santos is facing a 23-count federal indictment, including fraud related to his campaign finances. He also repeatedly lied about his family, background, and professional experience. Santos's parting words as he left the House building: "To hell with this place." A special election is expected to be scheduled in February to fill Santos's seat. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.